In this alternate timeline, Allied intelligence in 1943 intercepts fragments of blueprints from a hidden German research facility deep beneath the Bavarian Alps. The documents describe a device that shouldn't exist, a machine capable of bending electromagnetic fields in ways that defy conventional physics. OSS agent Sarah Blackwood and British physicist Dr. James Crawford are sent on an impossible mission: infiltrate the facility, understand the technology, and prevent Germany from deploying a weapon that could change the war's outcome. What they discover challenges everything they thought they knew about science, loyalty, and the cost of victory. This alternate history thriller explores what might have happened if the technological race of defied had taken a very different turn. Love alternate history? If you enjoy science fiction thrillers set in Woo, subscribe, hit like, and turn on notifications. Share this fictional story. Comment: what's your favorite alternate history? Chapter 1. The Intercepted Blueprints. Part 1. Bern, Switzerland, March 1943. Alternate history fiction. The package arrived at the American Embassy in Bern on a cold March morning in 1943. It was delivered by a nervous Swiss postal worker who claimed it had been found in an alley near the German consulate, addressed to the American Intelligence Service with no return address. Major William Donovan, head of the Office of Strategic Services, OSS, opened the package in his secure office. Inside was a leather portfolio containing approximately 40 pages of technical drawings, equations, and German text. The papers were photographed copies. Someone had risked their life to smuggle these out of Germany. Donovan wasn't an engineer, but even he could tell these weren't ordinary documents. The diagrams showed a massive cylindrical device with complex electromagnetic coils, what appeared to be some kind of resonance chamber, and mathematical equations he didn't recognize. He called in Dr. James Crawford, a British physicist on loan to the OSS. Crawford had worked at Cambridge before the war and had a reputation for unorthodox thinking. Crawford studied the documents for 3 hours without speaking. Finally, he looked up, his face pale. "Major, where exactly did you get these?" "Anonymous package. We believe from someone inside the German scientific community." "Why?" "Because if these are genuine," Crawford said slowly, "they represent technology at least 20 years ahead of anything we have. Maybe 50 years. "Explain," Donovan ordered. Crawford spread the drawings across the desk. "This appears to be some kind of electromagnetic resonance device. The theory suggests it could create localized distortions in electromagnetic fields. If it works, and that's a massive if, it could theoretically make objects invisible to radar, disrupt communications, possibly even affect magnetic compasses. A stealth device? More than that. According to these equations, it might create what I can only describe as an electromagnetic bubble around an object. Radar waves would bend around it. Radio signals couldn't penetrate it. It would be electronically invisible." Donovan leaned forward. "Could Germany build this? The mathematics are brilliant but highly theoretical. Building it would require resources, rare materials, and an understanding of electromagnetic theory that, frankly, I'm not sure exists. But..." Crawford hesitated. "But what?" "Some of these equations reference work by Nikola Tesla from the 1930s, research into resonant frequencies and electromagnetic field manipulation. Most physicists dismissed Tesla's later work as too speculative, but whoever wrote these documents clearly took him seriously." Donovan made a decision. "I need you to tell me 3 things. First, could this actually work? Second, if it works, what could Germany do with it? Third, how do we stop them?" Crawford thought carefully. "First, theoretically, yes, it could work. Second, if Germany deploys this on U-boats, they become undetectable. On aircraft, they could bomb London with impunity. On tanks, well, you get the picture. Third, we'd need to either destroy the facility where they're building it, steal the technology, or understand it well enough to develop countermeasures. How long would it take us to build something like this? Years, maybe a decade. We don't have that kind of time." Donovan picked up his phone. "Get me someone who speaks fluent German and can pass for a local. And I need our best agent available for immediate deployment." Part 2. London. 2 days later. Sarah Blackwood was reading in her small flat in London when the summons came. At 28, she was one of OSS's most effective field agents in Europe. Born to an American diplomat father and German mother, she spoke fluent German with a Bavarian accent and could pass for a local anywhere in southern Germany. She'd already completed 3 missions behind enemy lines, sabotaging a munitions factory in occupied France, extracting a defecting German scientist from Berlin, and organizing resistance cells in Poland. Each mission had been dangerous. Each had been successful. The briefing took place in a basement room beneath the American embassy. Present were Donovan, who had flown from Switzerland, Crawford, and Colonel David Bruce, head of OSS London operations. Agent Blackwood, Donovan began without preamble, we have intelligence suggesting Germany is developing an advanced weapons system at a facility we've designated Objective Chronos. We need someone to infiltrate the facility, assess the threat, and if possible, sabotage or acquire the technology. He spread the intercepted blueprints across the table. Dr. Crawford will brief you on the technical aspects. What you need to know is this. If Germany successfully deploys this technology, they could extend the war indefinitely. We cannot allow that. Sarah studied the documents. Where is this facility? Bavarian Alps, approximately 15 miles south of Munich. It's built into a mountain, completely underground. The entrance is disguised as a hydroelectric station. Security? SS guards, probably 24. Research staff of unknown size. The facility director is Dr. Wilhelm Richter, formerly of Berlin University. Brilliant physicist, committed Nazi. How do I get in? We've identified a supply route. Every 2 weeks, a truck convoy delivers materials to the facility from Munich. You'll replace one of the regular drivers. Once inside, you'll have approximately 6 hours before the trucks depart. Your objectives: photograph everything, assess whether the device is operational, and if possible, place demolition charges. Sarah looked at Crawford. Doctor, explain to me in simple terms what I'm looking at. Crawford walked her through the documents. It's called Project Schleier, Project Veil. The device creates electromagnetic distortions that could make objects invisible to detection. Think of it as bending light and radio waves around an object. Is that possible? The mathematics suggest yes. Whether they've solved the engineering challenges? Crawford shrugged. That's what you need to find out. And if it's operational? Then you destroy it, Donovan said flatly, whatever the cost. Part 3. Infiltration. 10 days later, Sarah was driving a supply truck through the Bavarian countryside. She wore the uniform of a Wehrmacht transport driver, complete with forged papers identifying her as Corporal Hans Becker. Her real papers, explosive charges, and a miniature camera were hidden in a compartment beneath the truck's seat. The convoy consisted of 4 trucks carrying supplies, scientific equipment, rare metals, food, and fuel. Sarah's truck was third in line. She'd spent the past week memorizing the route, studying the facility's layout, based on incomplete intelligence, and preparing her cover story. The approach to the facility looked exactly as described. A narrow mountain road ending at what appeared to be a small hydroelectric station. But as they got closer, Sarah noticed details that revealed the truth. Guard towers disguised as equipment sheds, machine gun nests hidden in rock formations, and camouflage netting that blended seamlessly with the surrounding forest. The convoy stopped at a checkpoint. An SS officer inspected papers, checked cargo manifests, and walked around each truck with a German shepherd trained to detect explosives. Sarah's explosive charges were wrapped in a special material designed to mask their scent, but her heart raced as the dog approached her truck. The dog sniffed, paused, then moved on. Sarah exhaled slowly. "Proceed to the loading bay," the officer said. "You have 4 hours to unload. Anyone found in restricted areas will be shot." The trucks drove through what appeared to be a large garage door built into the mountain. Once inside, Sarah saw the facility's true scale. The garage was actually a massive tunnel carved into living rock, extending hundreds of feet into the mountain. Arc lights illuminated a scene that looked more like a factory than a research station. Machinery, storage areas, offices built into the tunnel walls, and dozens of workers moving about. At the tunnel's far end, Sarah could see another set of heavy blast doors, undoubtedly leading to the actual research areas. She had 4 hours to get through those doors, find the device, photograph it, and sabotage it if possible. 4 hours to complete a mission that should take days. 4 hours to change the course of history. Chapter 2, Inside the Mountain. Part 4, The Facility. Alternate history fiction. Sarah worked mechanically with the other drivers, unloading crates of equipment and supplies. She studied the facility's layout, noting guard positions, security cameras, and most importantly, the workers' routines. She noticed something interesting. The researchers wore different colored badges. Blue badges could move freely in the loading area. Yellow badges could access the inner facility. Red badges, worn by only about a dozen people, apparently had complete access. As Sarah unloaded, a young scientist in a white coat approached. He wore a yellow badge and looked to be in his late 20s, with wire-rimmed glasses and an eager expression. "You there, driver?" he called in German. "That crate marked Wolfram? Be very careful with it. It's tungsten components, extremely heavy." Sarah nodded respectfully. "Jawohl, Herr Doctor." The scientist lingered. "Have you driven for us before?" "First time, Herr Doctor. Regular driver is sick." "I see." He paused, then lowered his voice. "Listen, I need to get a message to Munich. Personal matter. If I gave you a letter, could you post it? I'd pay you, of course." This was an opportunity. "Of course, Herr Doctor. Anything for the war effort." "Not exactly for the war effort," the scientist said with a slight smile. "It's to my girlfriend. We're supposed to marry next month, but I can't get leave from this place." Sarah saw her opening. "You must be working on something very important." "Important?" He laughed bitterly. "They tell us we're winning the war, creating wonder weapons. But I'm starting to wonder if we're not just wasting resources on Dr. Richter's obsessions." "Dr. Richter?" "The facility director. Brilliant man, but—" The scientist caught himself. "I shouldn't talk. But yes, if you could post this letter." He handed Sarah an envelope. Sarah pocketed it. "Consider it done, Herr Doctor. Call me Ernst. Dr. Ernst Weber. I work in Section 3, electromagnetic calibration." He sighed. 3 years I've been down here, calibrating coils and running tests. Sometimes I wonder if any of this actually works." "Works?" Sarah asked innocently. Ernst looked around to ensure no one was listening. "Project Schleier, the Veil device. They tell us it will make our ships invisible to enemy radar, our aircraft undetectable, but I've been here 3 years, and I've never seen a successful test, just endless calculations and prototype failures. This was valuable intelligence." "So it doesn't work?" "I didn't say that," Ernst corrected quickly. "The theory is sound, brilliant actually, but the engineering challenges—" He shook his head. "We need rare materials, precise calibration, and power levels that are difficult to sustain. Dr. Richter believes we're close to a breakthrough, but he's believed that for 2 years. Still," Sarah said carefully, "I'm sure the Führer appreciates your efforts." Ernst's expression darkened. "Yes, well, back to work." He started to leave, then turned back. "Actually, driver, we're short-handed today. One of our technicians is ill. If you're willing to earn extra money, we need someone to help move equipment in Section 3. Simple labor, nothing classified. Interested?" Sarah could hardly believe her luck. "Of course, Herr Doctor." Part 5, Section 3. Ernst led Sarah through the blast doors into the inner facility. A guard checked Ernst's badge, but barely glanced at Sarah. Apparently, manual laborers were so common they didn't warrant close inspection. The inner facility was extraordinary. It consisted of multiple levels carved into the mountain, connected by metal staircases and elevators. Each level was dedicated to different aspects of the project: theoretical calculations, component manufacturing, assembly, testing. Section 3 was on the 3rd level down. As they descended, Sarah tried to memorize the layout: guard posts, security cameras, emergency exits. The facility was well designed and heavily secured, but not impregnable. Every security system had vulnerabilities. Section 3 was a large chamber containing the electromagnetic calibration equipment Ernst had mentioned. The centerpiece was a massive array of copper coils arranged in a cylindrical configuration, approximately 12 feet in diameter and 20 feet long. Around it were racks of instrumentation, power systems, and monitoring equipment. "This is the test assembly," Ernst explained. "We use it to calibrate the electromagnetic field generators before they're installed in the main device. Your job is simple. Help me move these component crates from that corner to the assembly area." As they worked, Sarah asked questions. Ernst, clearly lonely and eager to talk to someone new, answered freely. He explained that Project Schleier had been in development since 1940, based on theoretical work by Dr. Richter. The goal was to create a device that could manipulate electromagnetic fields to render objects invisible to radar and radio detection. "The theory," Ernst explained, "is that we generate a resonant electromagnetic field at precise frequencies. This field creates a kind of bubble around an object. Electromagnetic radiation, including radar waves, follows the field lines around the object rather than reflecting off it. The object becomes invisible to electromagnetic detection." "But you said it doesn't work?" Sarah prompted. "It works," Ernst corrected. "In laboratory conditions, with small objects, we've achieved remarkable results. A metal sphere the size of a football, completely invisible to radar. But scaling up," he gestured at the massive coils, "the power requirements increase exponentially, and maintaining field stability becomes incredibly difficult. So the project is a failure?" "I wouldn't say failure. Delayed. We need a breakthrough in power generation or field stabilization. Dr. Richter believes he's close. He's been working on something in Section 7, the deep laboratory. None of us are allowed there anymore. Only his core team. Section 7. That would be where the main device was located." Sarah filed away the information. They worked for another hour. Ernst continued talking, growing more open as he warmed to his subject. Sarah learned that the facility employed approximately 120 people, 40 scientists and engineers, 30 SS guards, and 50 support staff. Project Schleier had consumed enormous resources but produced limited results. Several scientists had been transferred to other projects after expressing doubts. Dr. Richter had become increasingly secretive and paranoid. There were rumors of a major test scheduled for next week. As they finished moving the crates, Ernst said, "You know, you're easy to talk to. Most of the guards and drivers here, well, let's say they're not intellectuals. It's nice to have a conversation with someone who actually listens." Sarah smiled. "Happy to help, Herr Doctor. Perhaps if I drive the route again, we could talk more?" "I'd like that." Ernst checked his watch. "Your convoy will be leaving soon. You should go, and thank you for posting that letter." As Sarah headed back toward the loading area, she made a decision. She needed to see Section 7. She needed to see the main device, and she needed to make her move tonight. Part 6. The Night Infiltration. Sarah didn't leave with the convoy. As the other drivers prepared to depart, she slipped away, hiding in a storage room on level 2. She had approximately 12 hours before her absence would be noticed and her cover blown. She waited until 200 hours, the middle of the night watch when guards would be least alert. Then, dressed in a stolen white laboratory coat and wearing a yellow badge she'd lifted from an unattended office, she began her descent to Section 7. The facility at night was eerie. Most lights were dimmed to conserve power. The constant hum of machinery echoed through empty corridors. Sarah moved carefully, avoiding the main stairwells and using service passages she'd noted during the day. Section 7 was the deepest level, carved into solid rock nearly 400 feet below the mountain's surface. The entrance was guarded by 2 SS soldiers and a security checkpoint with a logbook. Sarah couldn't bluff her way past that. She needed another approach. She explored the perimeter of Section 7, looking for alternative access. The facility's ventilation system ran through large ducts along the ceilings. Maintenance shafts connected different levels, and she'd noticed during her earlier work that many of the oldest passages had been expanded over time, leaving gaps in the security coverage. She found what she needed, a ventilation duct that appeared to service Section 7. The cover was secured with standard screws. Using a multi-tool from her concealed equipment, she removed the cover and climbed inside. The duct was cramped and dark. Sarah used a small red-filtered flashlight to navigate, moving as quietly as possible. The metal duct carried sounds. She could hear voices below, The hum of machinery, occasional footsteps. After 20 minutes of crawling, she found a grate looking down into Section 7. What she saw took her breath away. Part 7. Project Schleier. Section 7 was a massive chamber, perhaps 200 feet long, 100 feet wide, and 50 feet high. It had been carved from solid rock and reinforced with steel, and in the center stood the device. The veil device was enormous, a cylindrical structure approximately 30 feet in diameter and 60 feet long, oriented horizontally and supported by a massive steel cradle. It consisted of multiple layers of electromagnetic coils. Sarah counted at least 7 concentric layers, each connected to banks of power systems and control equipment. Around the device, approximately 15 scientists and technicians worked at monitoring stations. At the center of the activity stood a tall man in his 60s with white hair and an intense expression. Undoubtedly, Dr. Richter. Sarah used her miniature camera to photograph everything she could see. The device, the control systems, the monitoring equipment. Each photo would provide crucial intelligence. As she watched, Dr. Richter addressed his team. "Gentlemen, we stand on the brink of a breakthrough that will change the course of this war. For 3 years, we have struggled with the challenges of scaling up our technology. But tonight, we test the modifications I have developed. If successful, we will demonstrate that Project Schleier is not only viable, but ready for operational deployment." "Dr. Richter," one scientist interjected nervously, "the power requirements for this test are at the absolute limit of our systems. If there's an overload—" "There will be no overload," Richter interrupted sharply. "I have recalculated everything. The resonance frequency is precise. The field generators are properly aligned. This will work." He gestured to the test chamber at one end of Section 7. Inside stood what appeared to be a full-scale mock-up of a U-boat conning tower. "When we activate the device," Richter explained, "the conning tower will become completely invisible to the radar systems we have positioned around it. If you are successful, gentlemen, U-boats equipped with this technology will be able to surface near Allied convoys completely undetected. They will devastate shipping without fear of air attack. The Atlantic will become our domain once again." The scientists moved to their stations. Sarah watched, fascinated despite the danger. This was exactly the intelligence Donovan needed. Proof that the device existed and was approaching operational status. "Power systems online," someone reported. "Field generators charging," another voice called. "Resonance frequency locked at target value. Safety systems engaged." Dr. Richter stood at the main control console, his hand hovering over a red switch. "Gentlemen, this is history. Activate Project Schleier on my mark. 3, 2, 1, activate." He threw the switch. For a moment, nothing visible happened, but Sarah could feel it. A strange pressure in the air, a humming that she felt in her bones rather than heard with her ears. The hair on her arms stood up. The air around the device seemed to shimmer. Then the radar displays changed. The operators stared at their screens in disbelief. "The signal is gone," one breathed. "The conning tower. It's not reflecting radar at all. It's completely invisible. Electromagnetic field stable," another reported. "Power consumption within acceptable parameters. Resonance maintaining frequency lock." Dr. Richter's face lit up with triumph. "Maintain this for 5 minutes. Document everything. This moment, gentlemen, is when Germany wins the war." Sarah had seen enough. She had photographic evidence. She had witnessed a successful test. Now she needed to get out and report to Donovan. She began backing through the ventilation shaft. That's when the vent cover she'd removed earlier clattered to the floor of the corridor below. Chapter 3. Escape and Revelation. Part 8. Discovery. Alternate history fiction. The alarm sounded immediately. A piercing wail that echoed through the entire facility. Sarah heard shouted orders in German. "Intruder! Section 7 security breach! Lock down all exits!" She crawled through the ventilation system as fast as possible, no longer caring about noise. Behind her, she could hear guards entering the ducts, searching for her. Sarah's memorization of the facility layout paid off. She knew exactly where she needed to go. Level 2. The storage area where she'd hidden her emergency equipment. From there, a service tunnel led to an emergency exit, a ventilation shaft that opened on the mountainside. But first, she had to reach level 2 without being caught. She dropped from the ventilation system into a corridor on level 4. 2 guards were approaching from the left. Sarah turned right, running full speed, shouts behind her, the crack of gunfire, bullets ricocheting off stone walls. She reached a stairwell and took the stairs 3 at a time, climbing up toward level 2. Behind her, boots pounded on metal stairs. More guards joining the pursuit. Level 3, level 2. She burst through the door into the storage-level corridor. Guards were already there, responding to the alarm. Sarah dove behind a stack of crates as bullets tore through the air where she'd been standing. She was trapped between 2 groups of guards. No clear path to the emergency exit. Her mission was collapsing. Then the lights went out. In the sudden darkness, Sarah heard confused shouts, guards calling to each other. Someone had cut power to this section. But who? A voice whispered next to her in German. "This way, quickly!" It was Ernst, the young scientist she'd met earlier. He grabbed her arm and pulled her through the darkness, navigating by feel and memory. "Why are you helping me?" Sarah whispered. "Because I read the letter you were supposed to mail," Ernst replied grimly. "It wasn't to my girlfriend. It was my resignation letter. I'm done being part of this. Whatever you're doing, I hope it stops Richter." He led her through corridors, avoiding guard patrols, until they reached a small maintenance room. "This passage leads to the service tunnel I mentioned," Ernst said, pushing aside a panel in the wall. "Follow it for approximately 500 meters. It exits on the east side of the mountain. Can you make it from there?" "Yes. Thank you, Ernst." "Don't thank me. Just make sure what I've been part of never gets used. Richter is brilliant, but he's mad with ambition. He doesn't care what happens to Germany anymore. He just wants to prove his theories." Sarah squeezed through the opening into the service tunnel beyond. As she did, Ernst pressed something into her hand, a small notebook. "My calculations," he said. "If your people understand the mathematics, they can develop countermeasures, or build their own version. Either way, Richter's monopoly on this technology ends." The sound of guards approaching made Ernst close the panel. Sarah was alone in the tunnel, in absolute darkness, with gunfire and shouts echoing behind her. She ran. Part 9. The Mountain. The service tunnel was exactly as Ernst described, a rough-hewn passage through solid rock, wide enough for one person with a slight upward slope. Sarah used her red-filtered flashlight sparingly, conserving the battery. After what felt like hours but was probably 20 minutes, she reached the exit. A steel grate covering a ventilation opening. Through it, she could see moonlight and smell fresh mountain air. The grate was locked, but Sarah had expected that. She attached a small amount of plastic explosive, one of the charges she'd brought for sabotaging the device. A tiny detonation blew the lock. She emerged onto a mountainside covered in snow and pine trees. Behind her, the facility was in full alarm, searchlights sweeping the area. She could hear dogs barking. They'd released the tracking dogs. Sarah had prepared for this. She pulled out a small vial from her equipment pouch and poured its contents on her trail behind her. A chemical compound designed to mask her scent and confuse the dogs. Then she began climbing, not down toward the roads where they'd expect her to flee, but up toward the mountain ridge. It would be harder, colder, more dangerous, but it was unexpected. She climbed through the night, using her training from alpine exercises with OSS. The temperature dropped below freezing. Her hands went numb. But she kept climbing, using the stars to navigate toward the Swiss border, approximately 40 miles to the southwest. By dawn, she was 10 miles from the facility, huddled in a rock outcropping while German search parties combed the valleys below. She ate a ration bar, checked her camera, undamaged, and Ernst's notebook, safely in her inside pocket, and planned her next move. She had to get to Switzerland, had to deliver the intelligence, had to warn Donovan that Project Schleier was real, operational, and ready for deployment. The fate of the war might depend on it. Part 10. The Debrief. 2 weeks later, London. Sarah had made it to Switzerland after 3 days of hiking through the Alps, evading German patrols. Swiss authorities had detained her briefly, then quietly released her to American custody. From Switzerland, she'd been flown to London. Now she sat in the same basement briefing room where her mission had begun, looking considerably worse for wear but alive. Donovan, Crawford, and Colonel Bruce listened as she described everything she'd seen. The photographs were developed and spread across the table. The Veil device in all its imposing scale, the control systems, the successful test. Crawford studied the images with growing concern. "The test you witnessed, you're certain it worked?" "The radar operators confirmed it," Sarah said. "The mock-up became completely invisible to their systems." "And this," Crawford held up Ernst's notebook. "Calculations from one of the scientists. He said it contains the mathematics behind the device. He hoped you could use it to develop countermeasures." Crawford opened the notebook and began reading. His expression changed from interest to alarm, to something approaching awe. "Major Donovan," he said quietly, This is extraordinary. These equations are beyond anything we've been working on. If they're correct, Project Schleier isn't just a radar-defeating system. It's a fundamental breakthrough in electromagnetic field theory. "Can we replicate it?" Donovan asked. "Given time, resources, and about 50 of our best physicists? Maybe, but it would take years. Germany is ahead of us by a significant margin. What if we destroy the facility?" Crawford shook his head. "That would set them back, certainly. But the knowledge exists now. Richter and his team know it works. They'd rebuild elsewhere." "Then what do we do?" Colonel Bruce asked. Sarah spoke up. "The device has a weakness. I observed it during the test. It requires enormous power, more than most ships or aircraft could generate. That's why their test used a stationary mock-up connected to the facility's power systems." Crawford nodded slowly. "That's consistent with the physics. The device creates a stable field that requires continuous power input. Remove the power, and the field collapses. So U-boats couldn't run it while submerged," Donovan said. "They'd have to surface and run generators, making them vulnerable," Sarah continued. "And the field apparently affects their own communications too. The test operators reported that radio transmission was blocked while the device was active." Crawford studied the equations again. "This gives us options. We can't stop Germany from deploying this technology, but we can understand its limitations and develop tactics to counter it. We hunt for U-boats that surface unexpectedly. We look for communication blackouts that suggest the device is active. We focus on killing them during the vulnerable moments." "There's something else," Sarah added. "Dr. Richter, he's obsessed with this project to the point of irrationality. Ernst suggested that Richter no longer cares about Germany winning the war. He just wants to prove his theories work. That kind of obsession makes people careless." Donovan made notes. "All right, here's what we do. Crawford, you take that notebook and every physicist we can borrow from Britain and America. Study it, understand it, develop countermeasures and detection methods. Bruce, you coordinate with naval intelligence. We need new tactics for hunting U-boats equipped with this technology." "And me?" Sarah asked. Donovan looked at her. "You've earned rest, Agent Blackwood, but something tells me you want back in the field." Sarah smiled grimly. "Richter is still operating. The facility is still functional. This isn't over." "No," Donovan agreed. "It's not. But because of you, we know what we're facing. And knowing is half the battle." Jack Beck, Chapter 4, The Counterstrike. Part 11, The Atlantic, June 1944. Alternate history fiction. U-342 surfaced 30 miles off the coast of Ireland just before midnight. It was a Type Seats U-boat, but with modifications, additional equipment installed in the conning tower, and a secondary generator system that gave it unusual power capabilities. Commander Hans Schmidt stood on the conning tower, breathing fresh air after days submerged. Around his vessel, the Atlantic was relatively calm. Visibility was good. Too good, really. This area should be crawling with Allied aircraft and destroyers. Schmidt's standing orders were clear: surface only when absolutely necessary. But tonight was different. Tonight, U-342 would test Germany's newest weapon. "Status of Project Schleier?" Schmidt called down to the control room. "Device is ready, Herr Kaleo. Generators at full power. Activate on my mark. Let us see if German engineering can defeat Allied radar." The device hummed to life. Schmidt felt the air pressure change, felt the strange tingling that came from being inside a powerful electromagnetic field. According to the technicians who'd installed this marvel, U-342 was now invisible to enemy radar. Allied aircraft could fly directly overhead and never detect them. Schmidt ordered his radio operator to transmit a pre-arranged signal to U-boat headquarters. Schleier operational. Beginning surface patrol. They cruised on the surface for 30 minutes. No aircraft appeared. No destroyers converged on their position. It was working. The device actually worked. Schmidt allowed himself a moment of triumph. Germany would win the Battle of the Atlantic after all. U-boats could hunt with impunity now. The supply lines feeding Britain would be cut. Then something streaked out of the darkness and exploded next to the conning tower. Grau, Part 12, Hunter-Killer HMS. Starling was a modified Black Swan-class sloop, part of Captain Frederick Walker's 2nd Support Group, the Royal Navy's most effective U-boat hunters. But tonight, Starling had special equipment, experimental detection systems developed by Dr. James Crawford's team. They couldn't detect the U-boat's radar signature. Project Schleier was effective at blocking that. But Crawford had realized something. While the device blocked radar, it couldn't hide the massive power consumption required to run it. Electromagnetic detectors tuned to specific frequencies could pick up the power signature at close range. Starling's new equipment had detected U-342's power spike from 10 miles away. Additionally, Crawford's team had realized the device blocked radio transmission, including the U-boat's own communications. That meant any U-boat using Schleier couldn't receive orders or transmit reports. Intelligence analysts watching German radio traffic could note suspicious silences and infer where Schleier-equipped boats might be operating. Starling had closed to weapon range without U-342's crew ever knowing they were being hunted. The first Hedgehog depth charge exploded near, but not close enough to inflict critical damage. Schmidt immediately ordered emergency dive, but Starling's ASDIC, sonar, had locked onto them. More depth charges followed, each one closer. U-342 dove desperately, but damage from the first attack had compromised their pressure hull. At 150 meters, the hull breached. The U-boat went to the bottom with all hands. Similar scenes played out across the Atlantic over the following weeks. Germany had deployed Project Schleier to a dozen U-boats. The Allies, using Crawford's detection methods and tactical innovations, sank 8 of them within 2 months. The technology that was supposed to turn the tide of the Battle of the Atlantic became a death sentence for the submarines that carried it. Part 13. The Final Mission. September 1944, Bavarian Alps. Sarah Blackwood returned to the mountains of Bavaria, but this time she wasn't alone. With her were 12 OSS commandos and a British SAS demolition expert. Their mission was simple: destroy the Project Schleier facility and ensure Germany couldn't rebuild it. The war had turned decisively against Germany. Allied forces were advancing across France after the successful D-Day landings. The Luftwaffe was being systematically destroyed. German cities were being bombed around the clock, but Project Schleier remained a threat that needed to be eliminated. The team approached the facility from the same emergency exit Sarah had used months earlier. This time, they were prepared with proper climbing equipment, cold weather gear, and enough explosives to bring down a mountain. They entered the facility at 300 hours, neutralizing guards, silently. The facility's complement had been reduced. Many scientists and engineers had been reassigned to more urgent war projects as Germany's situation deteriorated. Sarah led them directly to Section 7. Dr. Richter was there, working alone at his control console, still obsessed with perfecting his creation even as Germany crumbled around him. "Dr. Richter," Sarah said in German, her weapon trained on him. The old scientist turned slowly. His eyes were wild, his hair disheveled. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "You," he said, recognizing her. "The spy. You came back. It's over, Doctor. We're destroying the device." "Over?" Richter laughed bitterly. "It's not over. The work is never over. Do you understand what I've created here? This technology will revolutionize physics, communications, warfare itself. You can't destroy knowledge. We can destroy the device, and we can ensure you never build another." Sarah's demolition expert was already placing charges on the device, the generators, the control systems. Everything that made Project Schleier functional would be reduced to rubble. "You don't understand," Richter said desperately. "This isn't about Germany. This isn't about the war. This is about science, about pushing the boundaries of human knowledge." "Science without ethics is just destruction," Sarah replied. "Ernst Weber understood that. He gave us your secrets because he realized you'd lost sight of the human cost." Ernst was weak, sentimental. He couldn't see the larger picture. "No, doctor, you're the one who couldn't see the larger picture. Your device killed hundreds of German sailors because you never considered how the Allies would respond. Your obsession blinded you." The charges were set. Sarah and her team began withdrawing. "Wait," Richter called. "At least save the research, the calculations, the theory. It's too important to destroy." Sarah thought of the notebook Ernst had given her, safely in Allied hands, being studied by scientists who understood that knowledge required wisdom to wield properly. "The important parts are already saved," she said. "Everything else burns." They withdrew to a safe distance. At 0430 hours, the charges detonated in a carefully orchestrated sequence. The explosions collapsed Section 7, brought down the tunnel entrances, and destroyed the hydroelectric station that powered the facility. The Project Schleier facility ceased to exist. Debar. Epilogue. After the war. Fictional timeline conclusion. The war in Europe ended in May 1945. Germany surrendered unconditionally. Dr. Wilhelm Richter was captured by Allied forces and interrogated extensively about Project Schleier. He was eventually tried for war crimes related to the project, including the use of concentration camp labor in facility construction, which Sarah had documented. He died in Allied custody in 1946. Ernst Weber survived the war. He provided extensive testimony about Project Schleier and other German scientific projects. In the post-war period, he worked with American and British scientists, helping them understand the theoretical basis of electromagnetic field manipulation. He eventually became a professor at Cambridge, where he spent the rest of his career teaching physics and warning about the dangers of science divorced from ethics. Dr. James Crawford continued research into electromagnetic theory, but focused on peaceful applications. His post-war work contributed to advances in telecommunications and medical imaging. He received the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1952. Sarah Blackwood left the OSS after the war ended. She'd completed 7 missions behind enemy lines, each one more dangerous than the last. She returned to civilian life, eventually working as a translator at the United Nations. She rarely spoke about her wartime service. When asked about Project Schleier, she would only say, "We stopped something dangerous." That's what mattered. The technology of Project Schleier didn't disappear. The theoretical knowledge existed, contained in Ernst Weber's calculations and the research of post-war scientists. Over the following decades, variants of the technology would be developed for legitimate purposes: radar-absorbent materials for stealth aircraft, electromagnetic shielding for sensitive equipment, advances in telecommunications. But the weaponized version that Dr. Richter had created, designed purely for destruction without consideration for consequences, was never rebuilt. Years later, in a lecture at Cambridge, Ernst Weber reflected on Project Schleier. "We created something extraordinary. We pushed the boundaries of physics into new territory, but we did it in service of war, of destruction, of a regime that represented humanity's darkest impulses. I learned that scientific achievement without moral consideration is not achievement at all. It's just clever destruction. The device we built shouldn't have existed, not because the physics were impossible, but because we built it for the wrong reasons, in the wrong way, serving the wrong cause. Sometimes the most important scientific decision is not what we can build, but what we choose not to build." The files on Project Schleier remained classified until the 1980s. When they were finally declassified, historians debated whether the technology had been real or an elaborate deception. The physics seemed too advanced for 1944. The engineering challenges seemed insurmountable. But Sarah Blackwood, in a rare interview given just before her death in 1998, confirmed the story. It was real. The device worked. And we destroyed it because some technologies, even if they're possible, shouldn't exist. Not every scientific discovery should be pursued. Not every weapon should be built. That's the lesson we learned in that mountain in Bavaria, a lesson the world still needs to remember. End of fictional story. Reminder, this was complete fiction. This story was an alternate history, science fiction thriller, not real history. What was real in YT? Radar development by both sides, code-breaking efforts, Enigma, Colossus, advanced weapons research, V-2 rockets, jets, the Manhattan Project and atomic bomb, intelligence operations behind enemy lines. What was fictional in this story? Project Schleier and the Veil device, the electromagnetic cloaking technology described, the Bavarian Alps facility, all characters except historical figures, like Donovan, the specific missions and events described. Why write alternate history fiction? Explores what-if scenarios, entertains while respecting actual history, examines ethical questions about science and war, honors real heroes by showing the stakes they faced. Want to learn real woo history? Research actual projects like the Manhattan Project, atomic bomb development, Bletchley Park, code breaking, Operation Paperclip, post-war scientist recruitment, the development of radar, jets, and rockets, real OSS and SOE operations. Thank you for reading this work of fiction. Remember, real history is extraordinary enough without embellishment. Enjoyed this sci-fi thriller? If you love alternate history fiction, subscribe for more creative stories, hit like, and share with fans of historical fiction. Comment, what alternate history should we explore next? Turn on notifications.